welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be talking about this Washington Examiner article on restoring America and providing some commentary on it. It has to do with the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative that has been going on in America that has been to the detriment of American organizations and the American populace. So it starts off with the subheading of headlines that warn of impending doom for the diversity, equity, and inclusion industry complex have accelerated in recent months, sparking fears among DEI foot soldiers that the end is near. So diversity, equity, inclusion is really a matter of putting other characteristics ahead of actual competence, actual job performance, and it has led to a competitive disadvantage with other countries of the world, and really it's led to more hostility, more tensions in the workplace because you can never be sure that people are actually qualified for the job they have. And I've talked about this in other videos, but I saw this in academia quite frequently where if you were straight white Christian male, that counted against you when it came to getting jobs. They quite frequently wanted to hire people even if they were not as good of a candidate if they had some underrepresented minority status. And so let's read on with this article. Headlines that warn of impending doom for the diversity, equity, inclusion complex is nearing. Axios and others have reported on the slowdown in corporate DEI hiring this past year, citing Republican efforts to poison the social justice money well. DEI programs are also being slashed in universities and state governments following the Supreme Court's decision to strike down affirmative action in universities and a bevy of new anti-DEI bills passing in state houses across the country. The shift has been accompanied by heaps of bad press for the cultural movement following the October 7th terrorist attacks in southern Israel. The Chicago Black Lives Matter chapter's revolting decision to post an image praising the paragliding rapists and murderers has been regularly linked to the DEI worldview since its tenets justify all forms of resistance by the oppressed against the oppressors. Okay, so I can tell right off the bat here that I disagree with the writers of this article, and I'm going to tell you why. So it says, praising the paragliding rapists and murderers. There is absolutely zero evidence, literally zero, of any rapist amongst the Hamas freedom fighters during the October 7th attack. In fact, the Israelis refused to even pursue any potential evidence, any potential victims of sexual assault. They said, oh yeah, you don't have to worry about it, just take our word for it. There's no evidence of any sexual assault occurring on October 7th. Okay, just to get that out of the way. In terms of murderers, under international law, the Gazan population and the population of the West Bank as well are considered occupied territory, and they have a right to resist their occupiers. Okay, they are considered to be the largest open-air prison in the world, and so they are murdering the people who have no right to be occupying their country. Okay, so while there are people making common cause between diversity, equity, inclusion and the Free Palestine movement, they are for two separate reasons in most cases. And so, yeah, I do not see this the same way as the writers of this article see it, and I have, I think, provided good evidence that Hamas, especially in this case of October 7th, are not rapists and not murderers. I disagree with Hamas in other circumstances, such as their conduct during the Syrian civil war, but in this specific case, there is no evidence for the things being said in this article. So moving on, to be sure, Black Lives Matter Chicago didn't get in trouble for going too far. It got in trouble for remaining loyal to the letter of the DEI law under duress. So it's really interesting to me that you're seeing a lot of billionaires pull out of higher education. You're seeing a lot of pushback on the political front, on the social front, as soon as Jewish people are under pressure from the woke mob. When it was people who were of straight white Christian backgrounds, no one really cared that they were being discriminated against in higher education in various businesses. But as soon as the Zionists were facing similar discrimination, the woke mob became problematic. And you started to see articles like this. Really, really, really interesting. I'm not going to comment on it any further because I would probably get banned for commenting on it further, because that's the world we live in right now. So moving on, likewise, the omnipresent chant, from the river to the sea, more than a call to finish the job Hitler started last century, is an expression of decolonization. Okay, so they are an occupied territory. They are allowed to do that. And actually, the Likud party within Israel also talks about from the river to the sea. So if you say the words are genocide in one context, you have to say it is genocide in the other context because it is being used in the exact same way. So it goes on to say, despite the state of Israel not being a colony in any coherent sense. Okay, so coherent sense. So it is very clearly a colony. It's occupied territory. Okay, so moving on, which is a central priority of the DEI movement. Following years of moral bullying, Americans are now largely familiar with the term. They've decolonized everything from their bookshelves to their refrigerators, and they refuse to see the state of Israel as but another item to be eliminated out of the heightened cultural sensitivity. The bad press isn't showing any sign of letting up. Last week in Queens, New York, a frothing mob of 400 high school students hunted down a Jewish teacher for the apparent crime of saying, "I stand with Israel" on the internet. Days later, Representative Pramila Jayapal, Democrat from Washington, failed to unequivocally condemn the mass rape of Israeli women. Okay, so again, you have to prove that. If there's a crime being conducted, you have to provide some degree of supporting evidence. You do not. This is very frustrating because I could say I could accuse other people of any number of crimes. But if I don't have evidence, you do not have to support my accusations, okay? And there is no evidence for what is being said about Hamas right now in terms of what happened on October 7th. So, crystallizing the toxicity of the cultural movement she represents. Indeed, each time the media spotlight shines upon a prominent cultural progressive, a DEI department is gutted. For the tens of thousands of foot soldiers of the multi-billion-dollar global industry, these developments are cause for alarm. After all, DEI workers earn specialized degrees and certificates that only qualify them to work in the DEI field. Okay, so here's something I can agree with. These people really do not have good degrees. I know so many people who got these types of degrees, and it literally only qualifies you to make more of these degrees and to complain and to cause problems that you're supposed to be trying to solve. So it's a self-perpetuating cycle where they need to foment things like racial tension in order to create jobs for themselves. And it's not a good system. It's a really terrible way of putting together specializations, majors, types of degrees, because it forces people to create the problems that they're trying to solve. Okay, so it goes on to say, it's no small irony that an industry based on the commitment to ensure equal outcomes for all Americans is subject to the whims of the free market, same as any. The only thing that could be worse for the DEI industry would be the definitive end of human inequality. There has always been little incentive for any of this stuff to work, which perhaps explains why DEI initiatives often exacerbate existing problems. That is completely true given the research literature in professional and educational environments. Okay, so that's the thing that I'm saying. I think it's possible for people to focus on things like social justice in a normal context, not the current way of talking about social justice, but you can't have people who specialize in that and nothing else, because then if they actually reach social justice goals, they have to create more problems in order for their degrees to matter, in order for them to have a job. And so it makes more sense to have, say, an engineer focus on social justice and have that be kind of a side project, because then they still have other skills they can fall back on if their social justice goals are met. Versus having specific degrees, such as a feminist degree, a degree in feminism, which people actually have, because then you have to create problems that feminists need to be there to solve, okay? So having an engineer who's a feminist or having a scientist who's a feminist and they focus on these passion projects makes sense. But having someone who specifically focuses on oppression and feminism, and that's their degree, they need to create their problems so they can solve it. Okay? There's no backup skill set there. And that's concerning because they end up creating the problems, and that's a detriment to society. So moving on, it says, this is unsurprising since as anyone who's ever encountered DEI training can tell you, these programs are not designed to solve immediate problems, but rather to instill a revolutionary re-understanding of social conditions. So it was no surprise that Boston University launched an investigation this fall into the practices of its groundbreaking Center for Anti-Racist Research, headed by DEI kingpin Ibram X. Kendi. The university became concerned by the lack of research conducted in exchange for $30 million in endowment, as well as by complaints from faculty and staff regarding the center's management practices, so it decided to look under the hood. In the end, it didn't find much of anything, least of all a record of accomplishment. Amid the social panic that led to his rise, no one at Boston University or anywhere else stopped to ask what possible incentive could there be for Kendi, about whom there is nary a trace of warmth or goodwill, to solve the very problems that justify his lofty size. That's exactly the case, yes. This is not a person who's an engineer who's doing this on the side. This is their entire job, and because of that, they need to create problems for them to solve. Perhaps he always understood that racial progress was poisonous to his professional ambitions. Perhaps that's why he's always been averse to acknowledging progress in the first place. So no matter the fate of the DEI industry, the untold millions of dollars in book sales and grants ensure Kendi's security in the long term. The rank and file do not share this good fortune, however, for I, for one, will not hold my breath waiting for Kendi to spread his wealth around, not even for the sake of equity. So you can see here that DEI is dying, but it did not die because it was discriminatory against the average person. It died because it was discriminatory. It started to be discriminatory against the Zionists, who are the oligarchs who control Western society. So I hope you've picked that up, that it was fine for them to do these things, to be discriminatory against white people, but it was not fine for them to be discriminatory against Jewish people. That's when the entire industry was forced to collapse, which is what we're currently seeing. And maybe you should ask yourselves why that is the case. So that's all I'll say on the topic, because Zionists do control YouTube, so I'm not allowed to say any more. Thank you for watching. If you found this to be helpful, please give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Rumble. Please leave us a comment in the comment box below with your questions, concerns, critiques. I do respond to them when necessary, and I do read all of them. And tell a friend about our channel. We love to open the eyes of people to what is going on in the world. People have been, from what I've seen, very confused, and I think I have a decent lens through which to view the world that provides me decently good information of high predictive accuracy. And so I would love to share that lens with other people. So thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.